So I had no interest today to talk more about the Philadelphia Eagles. No interest. I'm over it. I've said my piece. Everything I've said about the Eagles so far has been largely true outside of the Saquon Barkley signing. I said that was a nonsense signing, and I cited that they had concerns in the secondary, but that secondary has been shored up by some rock-solid draft picks. But ultimately, the Saquon Barkley thing, I was completely wrong on. Just completely wrong on. The guy is an MVP candidate, but if you come here and you're not just looking for some guy who picks his nose and talks about sports, you know that I'll tell you when I'm wrong. I have no issues. I give you strong, hard opinions. I swing for the fences, and sometimes I'm wrong. The Saquon Barkley thing, I was just unequivocally wrong about. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about something that just came out for the Philadelphia Eagles just yesterday. We talked earlier in the season about there being a divide between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. This isn't something that I made up. This was a sourced piece. This was something that had came out, and Nick Sirianni tried to throw cold water at it. Jalen Hurts tried to throw cold water at it. And now you have this. There is a potential divide between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. And there is no way of someone saying that this isn't true or it's got no real juice to it, no legs to it. I've never seen a team be 11-2 and feel like they hate each other week in and week out. But according to Brandon Graham, he was, I'm assuming, asked about this in particular, but according to an article on CBS Sports from Jeff Kerr, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown's relationship, Eagles, Brandon Graham says they were friends, but things have changed. You can take that quote a lot of different ways. There was no issues. Sometimes people just grow apart. However, when you're still working with that person, you're a business partner with that person, you're trying to achieve a common goal with that person, this is the issue you tend to have. And you look at A.J. Brown's statistics this year, they're not as high as you thought they might be. He hasn't had double-digit targets since, I believe, week 1, if I'm not mistaken, that being for A.J. Brown in particular. And yesterday, 4 receptions, 43 yards on the season, 48 receptions, 836 yards, 4 touchdowns. To kind of put that in perspective for you for this A.J. Brown kind of keeping track of his statistics over the years, he's been much more productive. Last year, 106 receptions, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns. The year before that for A.J. Brown, 88 receptions, 1,400 yards, nearly 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns. And this year, with only 10 games played, 48 receptions, 836 yards, 7 touchdowns. So there's not only a divide between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts on the field. Mentally, it's not so sure that they like each other. And as much as I want to go after Nick Sirianni for this, and it is true, Nick Sirianni, I've mentioned before multiple times, I think he's a buffoon. I think this Eagles team has the legs to go the distance and win a Super Bowl given how much talent they have. But the reason they won't is because their head coach will keep them from that. But we knew that. Or at least some people might have forgotten because of this nice win streak they're on. And they are on a nice win streak. But this doesn't happen in Mike Tomlin's locker room. This doesn't happen in Bill Belichick's locker room. This doesn't happen in Andy Reid's locker room. You want to know why stories like this get out from the Philadelphia Eagles? Now the second one that Jalen Hurts has a divide, not with Nick Sirianni this time, but with A.J. Brown, that we're not so sure that they like each other. It's because people aren't worried, or I guess I should say players aren't worried about getting in trouble. They don't fear Nick Sirianni. They don't have a healthy fear of Nick Sirianni. They know they're talented. They know they're winning despite Nick Sirianni. And this stuff just builds. And it builds and it builds. And what's the sign of a team that clearly is very good, but has potential issues down the road? The Carolina Panthers are not a very good team. The Philadelphia Eagles are perceived as a great team. The Eagles should have stomped that team a couple of weeks, or last week. They should have stomped the lights out of the Carolina Panthers on Sunday. They didn't. And if Xavier Legette could catch the football, they would have lost. And that would have been forks and knives out for Nick Sirianni. But they escaped that win, narrowly so, doing so on talent alone, not coaching, not scheme, nothing else. They beat that team off of talent alone. And riding the legs of Saquon Barkley to 124 yards and on 20 carries. That's what they did. They rode their stars. But then you see now the issues with Jalen Hurts, with the head coach, and Jalen Hurts now with the wide receiver, the star wide receiver. And at some point, the common denominator here is Jalen Hurts. If Hurts isn't getting along with the head coach and Hurts isn't getting along with the wide receiver, both of those stories now are very publicly sourced, Brandon Graham being one of them. That's Jalen Hurts, who might not be this amazing leader that we thought he was. We knew Jalen Hurts had deficiencies throwing the football. We knew he wasn't the most accurate. We knew he didn't have the biggest arm. But one of the things about Jalen Hurts is, man, he's a leader. Well, hey, two prominent people, one being a star player, one being the head coach, have problems with him. That's what the stories say. That's what was sourced. So I could go after Nick Sirianni, and I kind of am still. But a lot of this falls on Jalen Hurts. If you are not going to be the most talented quarterback, or you're not going to be a top 5 talented guy, and I would argue, talent-wise, Jalen Hurts might not be in the top 8. You got to be a heck of a leader. Dak Prescott is this guy, right? Where Dak has all these issues mechanically, physically, he can't win the big game, but man, is he a leader. And man, do players respect him. And man, do players like him. They have a healthy fear of Dak Prescott. They're not afraid to get his face, but they got a healthy fear of him. You never see stories coming out of Dak Prescott fighting with CeeDee Lamb. They do it publicly, and CeeDee Lamb goes on and apologizes the next day. That's what happens. This story coming out is crazy, especially for a team being 11-2. There should be sunshine and rainbows. And it just goes to show you all these warning signs that I kept flashing for everyone all year long, saying, listen, I know they're 11-2, but are they really that good? This is why I don't think this team is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. This is why I don't think this team will be in the NFC Conference Championship game. I can't trust them. I don't trust their leadership. I don't trust their locker room. I don't really trust their front office. And now you see this story come out and you ask yourself, does this story come out? Does Brandon Graham say this about his star quarterback and star wide receiver if he doesn't have a healthy fear of Nick Sirianni? If he respects the leadership of Nick Sirianni? Does he do that for Andy Reid or Mike Tomlin or Bill Belichick? I'd say no. Loose lips sink ships. And now we have two stories, count them two, of Jalen Hurts at the beginning of the year having a rift with Nick Sirianni. That was well sourced. That was well out there. And now we have a story between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts having a divide or not necessarily friends. This is your star quarterback and your star wide receiver. A lot of this comes back to Nick Sirianni as well. Loose lips sink ships. This team is continuously winning off of talent and talent alone. If Xavier Legette could catch the football, the Eagles would have lost on Sunday, and then it really would have been knives out for Nick Sirianni. But since this talent is carrying him and lifting up this franchise past his moronic scheming and ability to game plan, he's still safe for now. But this can't happen. You cannot have a team that is not connected win a Super Bowl. You got to be much closer together than that. And so at this point, you just look at the Philadelphia Eagles and you think, it doesn't make any sense. You can't trust them. And that's ultimately where I'm at. I don't trust him. And a lot of this falls on Nick Sirianni. I don't think the players have a healthy fear of him. I don't think this story gets out for Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin. I don't think he is as detailed or as good of a schemer or game planner as Kyle Shanahan or even Mike McDonald or Mike McDaniel or even Mike McDonald as well. He's got issues. And this team doesn't respect him, and this locker room's not connected, and they're beating teams off talent and talent alone. It ain't scheming, it's not connectivity, it's not game planning, it's not coaching, and I don't think it's outstanding quarterback play. They're beating teams off talent. And when stories like this come out, that Brandon Graham is saying this is a guy in the locker room, has been around these guys, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, they're not really friends. That's a sign for actual worries for the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's why I will continue to say they're not a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and they absolutely will not be in the NFC Conference Championship game. They just won't.